we were attacked. We were called out by name by someone who really represents embodies the constituency of Israel's propaganda campaign, the sort of pantsuit feminist, pussy hat liberal, very politically mobilized kind of people who are gathered around Planned Parenthood, who always vote in every election, who are active on a local level. These, who are so furious that Hillary wasn't elected. This is for them. That's why Hillary Clinton and Sheryl Sandberg were trotted out at the UN to introduce this phony narrative. And one of them didn't attack us. It's Judith Levine, self-described repro justice warrior, abolition feminist who suffers no fools, which means she thinks she's smarter than everyone and has a condescending attitude, but she herself is a dupe for criminally mendacious government, because she led her piece in the liberal legacy publication, The Intercept, with the following, as you pointed out, Aaron. One thing is true: Hamas and other Palestinian militants committed unspeakable sexual violence against Israeli civilians on October 7th. And then she adds that some individuals and extreme left organizations have denied these atrocities or upheld them as justified resistance. Nobody has upheld imaginary sexual violence or real sexual violence as justified resistance. And why don't you name people? Okay.
Well, exactly. Because they've invented them, and that shows their evidentiary standards. And this is not just the author of that piece. This is The Intercept publishing it, which means that its editors co-signed this narrative and didn't subject it, again, to minimal journalistic scrutiny. So they're claiming that people have held up sexual violence as, quote, justified resistance. They don't link to any examples because there are none. They just made it up. And that shows the evidentiary standards they have to be assessing the claims of sexual violence by Hamas. And by the way, to support this claim, they link to a paper by the Israeli group Physicians for Human Rights.
In Israel.
In Israel, yeah. But the problem with that paper by Physicians for Human Rights is that they acknowledge they've interviewed a grand total of 0 people, and they also rely on the documented fraudster Zaka. So this all comes back to all these sources that are claiming that it's irrefutable that there was all the sexual violence on October 7th. They all come back to relying the same documented fraudsters, whether it's the New York Times, The Intercept, and now here, this latest example you have up on screen, The Nation magazine, a columnist named Katha Pollit, who was a major Russiagate dupe and attacked those of us who were not. Now attacking you and me, Max, here by name.
Yeah.
We're raising questions about these sexual assault claims.
Yeah, Katha Pollit, in her Russiagate fury, accused Matt Taibbi, because he was one of a prominent media figure challenging the narrative. She falsely accused him of rape. And this caused serious problems with nation leadership. I believe that lawyers had to get involved, and they had to retract that claim by her, which was so sloppy and consistent with what she's doing here, where she says that it leads. On October 7th, Hamas fighters raped Israeli women and girls. She just states it matter-of-factly with no evidence. The rapes are by now as substantiated as anything ever can be in an ongoing war. No, they're not. You're just intellectually lazy, ideologically committed to some form of liberal Zionism, and deep down inside, you're a racist because you just believe Arab men are savages who are capable of cutting off breasts and playing with them while they're on some military mission. She says you have to be a conspiracist or rape denialist to dismiss all that as fabricated. No, you just have to go through the evidence and go through the testimonies in a very clinical and methodical way, like we've been doing, and question it. And then the truth will come to light. And you have to question everything Israel says, because Israelis are lying. Official Israelis are lying when they're in public or when they're speaking. So they're lying. So she calls us out. Max Blumenthal claimed in a tweet last week, and she cites a tweet by me. And then she says his Grayzone colleague, Aaron Mate, demanded to see purported rape victims offering direct testimony. Never mind that they are dead. How do you know that they're dead? But
yeah, and by the way, all I pointed out was that there aren't no purported rape victims offering direct testimony. That was just a fact. It's just true. Like, I wasn't demanding, I'm just saying it's a fact. You're claiming all this rape occurred, but yet there's not a single alleged victim offering any testimony. That's all I was pointing out.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter because, like, you may have pointed out more than that, and you have, and I've offered a very substantive critique, and we've been talking about this for a while now, but she just cites two statements we made as though that's the entire scope of our critique, and then just moves on.
Yeah.
So she ignores our critique, but she also erases the many Palestinian, Muslim, Arab women in general who've been questioning this. Like, so many women have been seeing this propaganda campaign for what it is, and they're angry about it. And some of them are sexual assault survivors themselves who see it as cheapening their experience by using it to justify the massacre of women, using something bogus to massacre, to justify real massacres. Katha Pollit doesn't see it that way. So she singles us out to make this about us being sexist, rape apologists, and conspiracists, as if there are no women calling this out, and making it about women versus men, and reducing it to some kind of identitarian battle, which is extremely, and to polarize everyone on this issue in a gender-based way, which is just so cynical and so typical of the trashy techniques that she is accustomed to. We're not going to go for it. We should demand the right of reply, because neither of us are ever going to get published in the Nation otherwise. And I think Nation readers need to call this out. People who are watching this need to write the Nation and call this out. And Katha Pollit should actually issue a retraction, although I know she's an opinion columnist, but everything she wrote, including the I's and the commas and the periods in her piece, is false.
I think just this showing the screenshot will give this article more visibility than it otherwise would have gotten. I don't think too many people read that anymore. But
I understand what you're saying, but I think is that like Hillary's people came to her and got her to do this and to go after us because we become a problem. Or whoever was involved in that UN event with Sheryl Sandberg and Hillary Clinton. Like, I think they expected more of more propaganda success, and we're in the way. So I think this is an op. I think Katha Pollit was given this, and people said, you need to help us out here. Like, this is not working out.
Yeah. Or she's just a standard dupe and saw an opportunity to go after people who she doesn't like, which includes us, and to try to prop up a narrative that satisfies her own bigoted beliefs about Muslim men, which, as you pointed out, I think is a major part of this. And I'm not afraid to point that out. I mean, you have to, I think, to be able to have such absent evidentiary standards, to be able to parrot all these claims, for everyone to link to the same Israeli group's report, which admits they have no evidence, didn't speak to any witnesses, and cites the documented fraudster Zaka. You have to, I think, have some stereotypical beliefs going on to be able to rationalize all this to yourself. And that's what I think is the case here. And it's funny to me, the Intercept, while putting out this piece that says it's irrefutable that Hamas committed unspeakable sexual crimes, they also acknowledge in the next sentence that actually it's not, the full extent is not fully known. But meanwhile, they're trying to fundraise off of their coverage of Gaza as if it's somehow unique and special. So they're trying to fundraise off their Gaza coverage and claiming that they have moral clarity on this, that they're different than the mainstream media, while parroting one of the key propaganda claims right now to justify the Israeli assault on Gaza. It's just it's a funny window into how even alternative media works, that some people are just so gullible and so opportunistic, or whatever it is, that they just can't help but parrot the same propaganda that they claim to be debunking always.
So that Intercept fundraising appeal, I mean, they issued a fundraising appeal before this article. You pointed out the fundraising appeal was around Gaza, and it was to give to the Intercept and reward their, quote, moral clarity on the issue of Israel's war on Gaza. And then they published this piece just validating, providing progressive liberal left cover to Israel's propaganda campaign. And that fundraising appeal was signed by Naomi Klein, whose first salvo after October 7th was to lecture some on the left for cheering Palestinian resistance and not taking into account the lives of Jewish Israelis. And then she had to actually have The Guardian, her editors at The Guardian, change the headline of her article because she got so much pushback, including from Rifat Al-Arir, who was subsequently assassinated by Israel. And now she's like, Naomi's leading all these JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace rallies, and she's out front. But we got to remember how people initially respond in the shock of major moments, psychological attacks. And it's like the beginning of Russiagate, at the beginning of these major events, the beginning of the COVID event, how people respond as a real reflection of where they are. And if they have intellectual integrity, they'll at least acknowledge being wrong.
Yes. I mean, on the COVID event, I mean, I can't fault someone for getting it wrong at the beginning. I was
a massive psychological attack using everyone's mortality fears. So
absolutely. But it's interesting. Naomi's piece, talking about leftists who were celebrating attacks on Israeli civilians, just like this piece, which claims that the left has upheld sexual violence as justified resistance, doesn't offer any examples. So it's like left punching without even offering any examples of who you're punching. It's just pretty cheap. And that whole thing of, like, in general, of attacking people for positions that you actually can't show an example of, it's a really cheap tactic. And it's used to left punch. It's basically used, and it's used by opportunistic leftists to basically differentiate themselves from their other leftists, to show that they're acceptable to the mainstream, whether that's intentional or not. I think that's what's behind some of this too, is to, like, establish mainstream credibility by throwing other left-wing voices under the bus so that you can be the approved left-wing voice. I think that's what I'm seeing here in people trying to parrot now these evidence-free claims of mass sexual violence by Hamas, something similar.
Yeah, I mean, and look at Peter Beinart, and who's tried to make himself the darling of the Palestine solidarity movement after co-authoring editorials with Alan Dershowitz at the Daily Beast calling for dividing the West Bank into three.
Really? I didn't know that. That's crazy.
I mean, he was atrocious. He tried to be the voice of liberal Zionism. And then when he saw that intellectual wall crumbling, he just moved to Palestine solidarity. Then he, tried to attack me over calling out Russiagate and Trump Russia. And then, a year or two later, he was warning of the hubris of the new Cold War. It's always like that for someone who's playing respectability politics and trying to maintain 3 paychecks at all times. Mehdi Hassan and Peter Beinart have both pushed this New York Times article, along with Branko Marcetic at Jacobin, and none of them have done any of they're not approaching it like reporters. They're approaching it like public figures who want to show that they're sensitive to Jewish life or something. And they're not interested in the truth.
So disappointing, but I'm not surprised to hear that about Mehdi and Peter Beinart. Peter Beinart, I appreciate that he's someone who can reach American Jews in ways that you and I can't, just because of the way we talk and how we're not going to try to moderate our positions and be disingenuous. But I do think for some people who are totally closed off to what we have to say, there is some value in someone like Peter Beinart who can try to reach them with some humanity, but that is still no excuse for propping up the narratives that are used to dehumanize Palestinians. And I've noticed, I've read some of his stuff. He refers to the savagery of Hamas on October 7th, the barbarism. I've never, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll correct myself. I've never heard him talk about Israeli savagery in Gaza or the barbarism of Israel. And I've also heard him say that, Israel should have responded to October 7th with targeted attacks on Hamas, which to me fundamentally misunderstands what all this is about. This is about an occupation. And an occupier doesn't, I've said this before, it has to be repeated. The occupier, Israel, doesn't have the right to fire a single bullet into Gaza. October 7th was whatever you think of it, was a response to occupation. And therefore, Israel's only obligation is to end the occupation. They don't have the right to go into Gaza and do anything. All they have the obligation is to end the occupation and negotiate a release of captives. That's it.